Hello everyone, this is Kells Books for Kids, and here is Ever After High, the Storybook of Legends, Part 3. Enjoy! Chapter 6, Never After Again. Raven was an odd girl. Apple hadn't expected much for her efforts decorating Raven's room. Perhaps just a shout of joy, a sincere tear, or a hug and a homemade thank you card. But instead, Raven had been quiet since Apple moved in. Surely even. Well, Apple would not let it get her down. The students of Ever After High depended on her to be dependably cheery, especially at a party. She finished getting ready by pinning a casual wear tiara to her golden tresses and headed up to the royal common room. It was always elegant, marble floors, carved columns, sort of a fun-sized ballroom, but tonight it was simply enchanting. Briar had borrowed gold wire from Professor Rumpelstiltskin and crisscrossed it like streamers above their heads, providing perches for hundreds of live birds. Enchanted ivy was slowly growing, climbing up a wooden trellis in the centre of the room. Beneath the trellis, Melody Piper was DJing at the turntables, mixing an enchant single with some Lil Swain. Apple, you are totally fairest. Briar Beauty flung her long brown hair over her shoulder and gave Apple cheek kisses. As always, Briar was dressed to party, tonight in a loose silk top, tight pink skirt, black nylons worked with an edgy briar pattern, and super high heels. Briar had started the crown glasses trend that was taking over Ever After High, and other girls always took note of Briar's outfits to stay current in the latest styles. Briar thrust a crystal cup with a silver spoon into Apple's hands. Whipped air, try it. Totally invisible and totally good. Apple dipped the spoon into the empty cup and touched it to her tongue. The nothingness tastes like chocolate raspberry swirl. This is amazing. You are the queen of parties, Briar. Yeah, well, you never know when you're going to prick your finger on a spindle and sleep for 100 years, so I've got to live it up while I can. Ashlyn Ella rushed through the doors. Welcome to my book-to-school party, said Briar. Am I late? Asked Ashlyn, looking down at her mint party dress as if expecting it to turn to rags. Am I late? I hate being late. You're fine. You're on time. Don't lose a glass slipper. Oh, good, Ashlyn said, quickly cleaning dirt from under her fingernails. I went into the forest to help a mother fox relocate her nest and completely lost track of time. No sweat, Ash. Hey, could you be a deer? Briar pointed up to the hundreds of silent songbirds. I thought they'd sound spellbinding on the bass line. I tried earlier, said Apple. But when I sing to them, they just get frantic and flap around trying to save me from something. Ashlyn spoke to the birds. They tweeted questions at her in bird language. She answered in her own words, and soon the birds were chirping the bass line of Melody Piper's music. It's a universal truth that birds love princesses, but only Cinderella's daughter understood their language. More students arrived, children of famous princes and princesses, huntsmen, wooden puppets, and witches. When their parents, the class of classics, had ruled Ever After High, they had kept the royals separate from the commoners. But things had gotten more lax in their children's generation. Even though she was the royalest of royals, Apple approved of the elite mixing with the commoners. After all, Headmaster Grim often said, "You are all destined for greatness. There is no such thing as short stories or tall tales." This was Briar's party, but Apple and the other princesses stood beside her as the welcoming committee. Ashlyn Ella, Holly O'Hare, Duchess Swan, Darling, Charming, and Lizzie Hearts. Ever After High had more princesses than a theme park. Blondylocks, one of Apple's and Briar's best friends forever, also joined them. She claimed that her mother, Goldilocks, was a queen somewhere. Apple wasn't so sure, but Blondie was a sweetheart regardless. And oh, those golden curls. Apple, said Blondie, I love that skirt. Not too short, not too long, just right. Thanks, Blondie. Your boots are... Wait, is that bear fur? Faux bear fur, said Blondie, stroking the cuffs of her boots. Here comes Madeline Hatter, Duchess whispered. Madder than a hatter? How can you say she's mad? Ashlyn asked. She's the happiest person I've ever met. Not angry mad, said Duchess. She's crazy mad. Maddie! Briar called out. I'm so glad you could... Whoa, what are you wearing? A dress, Maddie said simply. She was, in fact, wearing a dress, but the neck of the dress fit tight around her knees, and the wide, stiff tulle skirt shot up around her neck. She'd put the dress on upside down. Exactly. I put it on upside down, said Maddie. That's what I just said. I know. I was just repeating what you said because no one else can hear you besides me, said Maddie. Who are you talking to? Briar asked slowly. The narrator. Anyway, it was an accident, the whole me putting on my dress upside down thingy. Because one can't see when one is dressing in a cheese closet, obviously, but it somehow fit just right. Blondie smiled. I don't know how, but it looks crazy amazing upside down, said Briar. Like, seriously, I'm thinking I have to try that. I'm pretty sure none of my dresses would fit me upside down, said Apple. Said Muddy. Maybe you need to be upside down, and the dress should be the right side up. Okay, said Apple without blinking. I've never been in the Royal Common Room, said Maddie, gazing at the cosy ballroom. The commoner common rooms looks like the inside of a shoemaker's shop. So you hexted me that you were bringing a roasted pig for the refreshment table, Briar said, looking at Maddie's empty hands. Well, her hands weren't exactly empty. She'd fitted her hands with her shoes and her feet with her gloves, but they were empty of any food items. Silly! I never said roasted, said Maddie. She removed her shoes, took off her large striped hat, and stuck in her hands up to her elbows, digging around. There was a grunt. It hadn't come from Maddie. Aha! Out of the hat sprang a pig. It began snuffling the floor. He's a darling, isn't he? And probably housebroken, since he appears to be hat-broken. I'm going to call him Snuff-Piddle-Dee-Doo. Snuff-Piddle-Dee-Doo went around sniffing people's shoes as if hunting for treats. When he smelled the girl in the corner wearing a red cloak and hood, the pig squealed in terror and bolted away. The red-hooded girl looked around with wide eyes, as if checking to see if anybody had noticed. You know, the first time I met Circe Hood last year, she was wearing her cloak and hood, and I assumed she was just cold, said Apple. But I've never seen her take it off since. Yeah, what's her deal? Asked Duchess. Nobody knows, Maddie said mysteriously. Well, I bet the narrator knows. Of course, but I'm not telling, at least not right now. Maddie stuck out her bottom lip. Spoil sport. The door opened as if by wind, blowing out candles, and in came Raven. Whoops, sorry, said Raven, trying to grab the door before it slammed into the wall. That's new. Melody Piper stopped the music with a scratch. The birds swallowed their song. The common room became uncommonly quiet. Some students rubbed their arms as if they felt a chill. Oh, calm down, said Apple. It's just Raven. Yeah, come on, party time, said Briar. Melody Piper started playing the music again, but the birds didn't join in. Briar reached up and nudged a bird with her finger, trying to get it to sing again. The bird clapped its beak shut and shook its head, keeping one round eye trained on Raven. Hey, maybe I should just go. Raven started to turn. Nonsense, said Apple, taking her by the arm and pulling her further into the room. You are my roommate and my friend. You are most certainly welcome. Everyone, be nice. The mood seemed to relax. Apple nodded, satisfied. She believed there were almost nothing a few encouraging words and a warm smile couldn't fix. Even back in nursery rhyme school, Apple had had to scold the other children for being a bit hard on the evil queen's daughter. But this year, their legacy year, things were becoming more intense. Despite her mother, Raven had always been a nice girl. Yes, she would grow up to poison and rampage and try to destroy all happiness, but that was no reason not to be civil. And it was Apple's job as president of the Royal Student Council to set an example of civility. You look bewitching tonight, Raven, said Apple. Really? Raven whispered. Then why is everyone looking at me like I'm some warty toad? Hey, said Hopper Croakington, who happened to be passing by. Sorry, Hopper, said Raven. Apple took Raven by the arm and walked her to the refreshment table where Duchess Swan was sampling a cup of whipped ear. Duchess had expressed an interest in running for president too. Apple was sure she could count on her to be an example setter. Duchess, say hello to Raven, said Apple. Duchess stared at Raven with dark, unblinking eyes. Hello, she said flatly. Hey, Duchess, said Raven. Then to Apple, I really don't need to stay. I'll just say hi to Madian. Nonsense, said Apple. You have every right to be here. Duchess smoothed her feathered skirt and looked down her thin nose at Raven. I don't usually hang around with commoners. Not that such things matter, Duchess, said Apple, but Raven is the daughter of a queen. An evil queen? A playful light danced in Duchess's eyes. Looking forward to that, are you, Raven? Pretending to be nice all the time must be exhausting. I'll bet you can't wait to sign that book and embrace your future already. Not really, said Raven. Apple started to suspect chatting with Duchess wasn't helping any matters. She took Raven's hand and tried to move her away, but the common room was crowded and she bumped into Lizzie Hearts. Excuse me, said Apple. Off with her head, replied the Queen of Hearts' daughter. Did that sound commanding enough? I've been practicing. Her pet hedgehog leaped from her shoulder, curled up and rolled into the crowd, and Lizzie chased after him, shouting, Step not on my pet, or I shall call an army down on your heads. Now there's a future villain who doesn't pretend, said Duchess, nodding at Lizzie Hearts. She's destined to be an evil queen, and she owns it. Why are you so afraid to own it, Raven? Back off, Duchess, said Raven. Your story doesn't end any better than mine. The feathers on Duchess's cap bristled. At least I'm not a villain, said the daughter of the Swan Queen. At least my greatest ambition isn't to fall in love with a prince, only to lose him at the end. Now, you two, this is a party, Apple said, as sugary and warm, as fresh as a cobbler. Neither of them looked at her. Oh, wait, maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe you actually believe you are nice. Duchess tilted her head, looking at Raven with an expression of mock concern. You poor, sweet child. Did your daddy lie to you when you were just a wee little hatchling? Did he promise you that you had a good heart, and that if you wanted you could grow up to be just as nice and stupid and boring as he is?" Apple held her breath. Her face burned. Not at Duchess's rudeness. Apple knew that Duchess desperately wanted a happily ever after, and any reminder that she wasn't getting one always ruffled her feathers. No, the heat was coming from Raven's hand, which had suddenly become hot. Summer pavement hot. 24 blackbirds baked in a pie hot. "Raven," Apple said, carefully not letting go of Raven's hand. But Raven was staring at Duchess, her hands curling into fists. Duchess took a step back, the feathers on her cap wilting. Her expression said she'd known she'd gone too far. "Don't," Raven breathed. "Ever," she whispered. "Talk," she muttered. "About," she said. "My father," she shouted. "Ever after again." Apple ducked, putting her arms over her head, just as a swoosh of hot energy exploded from Raven. Fortunately for the party-goers, the magic burst upward. Unfortunately for the birds, it hit them dead on. The gold wires hanging from the ceiling swung wildly, and the birds were no longer birds. Fat, shiny snakes now clung to the wires with clumsy tails. They began to hiss in alarmed unison. Someone screamed. The snakes couldn't hold on and began dropping down. Some landed on the marble floor with wet slaps, but most landed on people's heads and shoulders. More people screamed. The birds turned snakes were by nature afraid of snakes, and they began to writher about frantically, trying to get away from one another, knocking over lamps and statues. The ones on the table was upsetting candlesticks and cups of whipped air. Invisible food splattered everywhere. Snuff Piddledee-Doo let out a terrified oink and charged through the crowd, desperate for any exit. "Quiet down, please," Apple said. She tried to hum a calming sort of tune. But no one could hear her over all that screaming. "It's the evil queen! She's turning everyone into snakes! Run for your lives!" Snakes and people alike were trying to flee, but it was Raven herself who was the first one out the door. Apple stayed behind to console Briar and help clean up the party. Duchess even volunteered to turn into her swan form, fly to Baba Yaga's cottage, and ask the dark sorcery instructor to come change the snakes back into birds. By the time Apple returned to her dorm, Raven was in bed, her pillow over her head. Apple had bought the goblin face sheet set for Raven. She'd hoped having evil items in her room would make her feel more at home. Apple put a hand on her back. "Raven, please leave me alone," Raven whispered. "Everything will be okay," Apple said. "It really will." High school could be challenging at times, but life would be as happily ever after as it was supposed to be. Apple believed that from the tip of her casual wear tiara down to her white faux leather booties. She just wished Raven could believe it too. Chapter 7. The Looming Threat of Legacy Day. No magic, no magic, Raven reminded herself over and over as she rushed from her dorm room out of the castle. After last night's disaster at Briar's party, she'd skipped breakfast in order to lie low. But there would be no skipping the Legacy Day practice. And there was no way to be inconspicuous in a high-collared purple top and black netting skirt. Curses. But why didn't she own any plain, boring clothes? On the east terrace of the castle, Headmaster Grimm was already standing atop the pedestal. The white stone monstrosity was 2 stories high, with red stone stairs on both sides. Just the sight of it made Raven shiver. "Stop being such a nursery rhyme," Raven scolded herself. "You are the future evil queen, so get over it already, and don't waste any more of your teenage years worrying about it." And though Legacy Day is still a few weeks away, I want you well prepared, Milton Grimm was saying. It is an ever after high tradition during orientation week for our second-year students to climb these storied stairs, stand at this fabled podium and practice declaring your destiny. On the actual Legacy Day, when you say your name, your magical key will appear. You will insert it into the Storybook of Legends and turn it 30 degrees clockwise. Then stand, shoulders back, and declare your destiny to the world. Though, of course, we won't practice with the actual Storybook of Legends, today he slapped onto the podium a thick book. We'll be using a book of entirely reasonable school rules. Maddie showed no concern as she bounded up the stairs for her turn. I'm Madeline Hatter, and I pledge to follow the destiny of dear old Dad, the Mad Hatter of Wonderland. She pulled a cup of hot tea from her hat of many things. Done! Tea time! Hunter Huntsman was next. He threw back his broad shoulders and declared, I pledge to follow my destiny as the next huntsman to save Snow White and Red Riding Hood. In line beside Raven, Ashlyn Ella moaned sadly. Raven perked up. Could it be that there were others like her who were less than excited to sign? No, that was wishful thinking. After all, as the next Cinderella, Ashlyn was guaranteed a happily ever after. No. It is I, Prince Daring Charming, eldest son of King Charming. The prince had a lean, athletic build, his hair so blonde it was almost white. He smiled, his white teeth twinkling, and Raven heard several girls sigh. I pledge to be the heroic prince who saves fair Snow White. Apple waved at Daring from the crowd. Daring winked. Daring's lanky brother Dexter, just 9 months younger, jogged up to the stairs, stumbling on the top step. Don't worry, little brother, said Daring, grabbing Dexter around the neck and rubbing his knuckles into his hair. Learning to climb stairs is tough. You'll get the hang of it. Hey, Dexter said as if offended, though he was smiling. He grabbed his older brother in turn, and laughing they each tried to pull the other to the ground. Raven suspected this good-natured wrestling match had gone on throughout the brothers' entire lives. Your Highnesses, please, said the headmaster. Daring let go and let down the steps, taking 3 at a time. Dexter straightened his thick black glasses and tried to smooth his brown hair, but a stubborn front cowlick sent his sticking back up again. Hi, Dexter said at the podium, his dimple showing. I'm Dexter Charming. Well, I should use my full name, right? I am Dexterous Charming, another son of King Charming, and I pledge my destiny to be one of those Prince Charmings who saves princesses. But, Headmaster, can I ask a question? I've never been clear about which story is my destiny. Gallant princesses are needed in many stories, said the headmaster through a megaphone from below the pedestal. On the actual Legacy Day, when you make your pledge, the Storybook of Legends will show you your destined story. On Legacy Day? Oh, okay. I've waited my whole life to know. I guess another few weeks isn't so bad. Raven watched several more students practice their oaths and tried to psych herself up, but when it was her turn to stand at the tall podium, she froze. It's just a rule book, she reminded herself. This isn't real. But the looming threat of Legacy Day was becoming as real as fairies in the enchanted forest. Raven didn't feel evil. She imagined her mother standing in that same spot many years before. Had her mother always been evil, or had signing the book turned her into the evil person Raven knew? When Raven signed, would she suddenly lose herself and transform into that vain, angry, power-mad sorceress who raised her? Or worse, Would she stay the same Raven as always, but the binding magic of the Storybook of Legends would force her to do and say hateful things? Maddie waved at her. Raven couldn't imagine her mother being friends with someone like Maddie. Once Raven signed, would her friendship change? Disappear? The sky was as bright as blue as witch's candy, but Raven shivered. "Miss Queen," Headmaster Grim prompted through his megaphone. "Right. Sorry. I'm Raven Queen, and I pledge to follow my destiny as... She looked over the crowd. Everyone was casual, chatting with one another, or looking out at the view of the enchanted forest and the mountains beyond. Maddie was playing patty cake with her pet dormouse, Earl Grey. Only one face was turned towards her, Dexter Charming. Behind his thick glasses, his eyes were friendly, and his smile seemed so genuine the kindness took her breath. He'd been brave enough to ask a question. Perhaps she could be too. "Headmaster Grim," she squeaked, I have a question." "Yes," Headmaster Grim said, his eyes narrowing slightly. "I was just wondering, what happens when I take the pledge? Do I change into the evil queen just like that?" Headmaster Grim's answer came with a glaring beep on the megaphone. "You are promising to carry out your part of the Snow White story." "Yeah, I get that, but what if..." She thought of Maddie's game. "If I didn't have to be the evil queen... What if I don't want to?" There was a general gasp. Headmaster Grim put down the megaphone and walked slowly up the stairs. Raven's mouth was too dry to speak, and her feet felt as cold as mermaid flippers. He stood before her, arms folded. "Miss Queen, don't even joke about such matters. You know the pledge is the greatest protection I can give you. Every citizen of Ever After exists as part of a story. If we don't retell those stories, they vanish, and we along with them, poof." Raven nodded slowly. He put one heavy hand on her shoulder. "All will be well in the end." Raven tried to smile as if comforted, but she barely felt her face budge. Headmaster Grim held out his hand, inviting her to finish her practice pledge, but Raven couldn't muster the will. She pretended not to notice and instead plodded back down the stairs. At the bottom, Baba Yaga blocked her path. The witch snapped, raised her hand, and pulled something blue out of the air above her head. It was the spray bottle. Raven shut her eyes as Baba Yaga sprayed her in the face. "Sorry," Raven said, sputtering. said Baba Yaga. The practice went on, and Raven hung back against the wall, hoping her purple and black outfit allowed her to blend in with the shadows. But someone found her. "Hey," said Dexter, "that was cool, what you said up there." "It was?" Raven asked, blinking as if she'd just been sprayed in the face again. "Yeah, I know Headmaster Grim knows best, and this is important, but sometimes I feel like we're not supposed to even ask questions." He kept his eyes on his hands. Raven noticed they were calloused from all that sword fighting and princess saving practice. "It was cool, that you did ask. That's what I thought, anyway." "Thanks," said Raven. Besides, Apple, who was everyone's friend, none of the other royals had ever talked much to Raven. "It must be nice having some mystery with your story, not growing up under the pressure of knowing exactly what you'll have to do." "Nice? I'd say it's more, not nice." He laughed at himself. "I'm slick with the words, obviously." Raven laughed. "What part is not nice?" "Well, how everyone else has been able to recite their story since they learned to talk, while I'm facing this huge unknown. There is a story planned for me, but I can't plan for it, I'd never thought about it before." Raven straightened. do you know what would be most excellent? If we could get a look at the Storybook of Legends before Legacy Day. You know, to see our stories played out there on the page. Really, just understand what we're committing to before we have to sign, right? Dexter nodded, his eyes never leaving Raven's face. Well, we could sneak into Headmaster Grimm's office and take a peek. Yeah, but I can't. My dad, King Charming, super strict, no break of rules. He mimed, his finger cutting off his head. Raven slumped. But hey, you surely should, Raven, if you think you should. Yeah, I kind of do. Dexter, do you think you could help me out with a distraction of sorts? Dexter's eyes lit up. I love helping you. I mean girls. I mean anyone. I mean, usually people ask my brother Daring for help with things. Are you sure you aren't confusing me with him? Raven glanced over at Daring, who was flexing for a group of girls. Yeah, I'm sure. You're clever. You think I'm clever? And brave. You think I'm brave? Well, of course I do. I mean, you are. Why did he sound so unsure? He was a prince, and a charming prince at that. So anyway, I was wondering, could you keep Headmaster Grimm busy after this? Say, take him out of the castle and... Oh, I know. I could show him the catapult I've been working on in the sword training meadow. He loves flinging cabbages over the wall. It's basically his weakness. Raven smiled at him crookedly. She'd spent a year at the same school as Dexter without having ever spoken to him. He'd always just seemed like a slightly younger, slightly darker version of his popular brother, but she was beginning to realise that Dexter wasn't much like Daring at all, and in a good way. Thanks, said Raven, and she hurried off into the school. She crept up the spiral staircase, past the Hall of Armour, and into the headmaster's office. Her heart was beating like blackbird wings. She tried the door, locked, just as she feared. What do we have here, my cousin Gus? Asked a high-pitched voice. From an alcove opposite Grimm's office strode Helga Crumb. Her blonde hair was in curly pigtails, her red lips puckered. She wore a green dress embroidered with white flowers, knee-high socks, and hiking boots. The daughter of Hansel was never seen without practical footwear. One never knew when one might get lost in a forest. I do not know my cousin Helga. What do we have here? Beside Helga stepped Gus, son of Gretel, wearing green leather shorts with suspenders and, of course, hiking boots. Besides different clothes and shorter hair, he looked identical to Helga. Their voices even sound identical, with heavy vowels and W's changed into V's. Raven was never sure if that was their natural accent, or if they just liked the way it sounded. It appears we have a little lost birdie snooping around, said Helga. If we report little birds snooping where they do not belong, Headmaster Grimm gives us a lollipop. No, said Gus. Yeah, he does, cousin Gus, a strawberry lollipop. Gus and Helga began to smack their lips as if imagining sucking on a lollipop. A strawberry lollipop. Hey, I'm not doing anything, so don't go tattle, okay? Said Raven. And what will the little birdie give us not to tell, I wonder, cousin Helga? Yeah, I wonder too, cousin Gus. What will the birdie give us? They both held out a sticky hand, palm up. Raven leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing. Gus and Helga leaned back slightly, their eyes began to widen. Raven lifted her hands as if she would cast a magic spell, and Gus and Helga held their breath. Run, she whispered. Ah, they said, running away, and Raven laughed. We are not afraid of the little birdie, Helga called down from the hall. We are destined to cook witches like her. Maybe we will practice on the birdie first. But for now, they kept running. Still, it was too risky to break into Grimm's office when those candy-mad identical cousins might come back at any moment. Raven would have to wait for the right time, and the right distraction. She was determined to see her story before committing to it on Legacy Day. Maybe her own story wasn't exactly like her mother's. Maybe she could play out her part without being truly evil. That was what she hoped anyway. When Raven was young, her mother had filled her castle with her own servants and allies. The good king hadn't been comfortable rubbing elbows with fiery-eyed warriors and scrabbling gobbling hordes, dripping slime and chittering about excellent flavour of people meat. Eventually, the king and queen split the castle down the middle, his side and her side. The king lived on the smaller portion with the servants, and Raven spent half of each week with him. On her 6th birthday, Raven's father gave her a puppy with curly white hair. Raven named him Prince. The next day, when Raven returned to her mother's part of the castle, the queen scowled at the dog. "A puppy? What was your father thinking? A dark sorceress can't be expected to take care of a puppy." "I'll take care of him, mother," young Raven promised. "You? But surely you're like me, allergic to all things cute and fluffy." "I know what we need to do. Come, let's make a puppy potion." Raven skipped after her mother to the dungeon workshop, wondering what a puppy potion might do. Maybe make a puppy bigger. Enchant a puppy to help him fly or speak. After mixing, stirring, boiling, and muttering, the vial of black potion was complete. The queen told Raven to tip it over the dog. "Here you go, boy," Raven said, pouring without hesitation. The instant the black liquid touched the puppy, the bouncing, wagging creature transformed into a bone rat. Bone rats were 5 times the size of normal rats, with spiky black fur and glowing red eyes, and lived on a diet of bones. "There! Isn't that better?" the queen said triumphantly. "Powerful dark sorceresses like us are so much more comfortable with a bone rat for a pet." "But," Raven said. "Raven, don't sulk," said the queen, her hands on her hips. "I'm doing what's best for you. Don't you want to grow up to be powerful and command an army of dark creatures? Of course you do. A puppy is only fit for one of those simpering, ballad-screeching, weak princesses who always do good and sit around waiting for a prince." "But I like the puppy," Raven thought to herself, "and the bone rat scares me." But Raven did not dare speak up. The bone rat ran from Raven towards the queen, its claws clicking against the stone floor. It wrapped its long, hairless tail around the queen's ankle and made a horrible, raspy grunt. "What should we name him?" the queen had asked. "How about Bubonic? Come on, Bubo." The queen had started up the stairs. Raven had just stood there, staring after them, the empty vial still in her hand. Her mother was always saying, "Someday you'll grow up just to be like me." Watching her puppy change into a bone rat had been the first time that Raven had thought, "But I don't want to be like you, mother." And from that day on, Raven was absolutely certain about one thing. She didn't want to be evil. Hello everyone, that's end of part 3 of Ever After High's Storybook of Legends. I really hope you enjoyed it just as much as I did. Remember to like and
let's push it hard tonight. I wanna see the morning light. I wanna feel real love. I just can't get enough. Alright. I'm in over my head. Hey, but we'll see when we're dead. Oh, I'm in over my head. Hey, but we'll see when we're dead. La, la, la. See when we're dead. and I'm in over my head, endless sleep.